Hey, it's Steve Riley. Welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. And today I am bringing back one of my favorite guests, one of my friends, one of my co-collaborators, Robert Rose. Robert, how you doing?
I am doing well, sir. How are you?
I am great. I was looking forward to this podcast since we scheduled it, so I'm
Oh,
really excited about
wonderful.
it. So here's why I think not only are you important to me, but you're important to our whole Atticus community. And I want to talk about that for a minute.
Mm,
I think lawyers, by their training, are uniquely positioned to be great content marketing. I don't want to say gurus, but marketing influencers, marketing strategists. I really think that we're uniquely designed, but most of us, first and foremost, understand what content marketing is and really don't take the time to think through how we take advantage of our training and skills. Now, the reason that you're so important to me and so important to the audience is that you are the foremost thinker in my eyes in the field of content marketing. And my hope is that you will help me with my goal of getting every single lawyer inside the Atticus community and maybe even our podcast community taking on at least one content marketing project so they can stretch their muscles and really learn how to take advantage of what their unique gifts are as a content marketer. How's that sound?
I love every bit of that. And yes, so much to share. It's very inspirational. It's actually working with lawyers as I have for the last 6 months or so has been really, I think, one of the more inspirational sort of verticals that I heretofore had not had any experience in, but now yeah, there's a lot to share.
We're trained advocates. And in the process of being trained advocates, we learned how to persuade and tell stories. You can't go before a judge, a jury, or even in front of a audience without trying to convey some form of story so that they can understand how the law impacts them. And I think some of the most influential marketers I know as lawyers are some of the best storytellers. Number two, we're trained to write and speak. And we've gone through a lot of training to communicate both in verbally and in writing. And I think it gives us a leg up on the average, let's just say the average marketer because of the intense training. And then I think three for me, and you'll have to give me feedback on this. Lawyers are pretty much trained to work hard. Like we're trained to work hard. So if you point us in the right direction, we will generally outwork most people because that's how we've been trained to work. So we're trained storytellers, trained communicators, and we're really good at taking complex stuff and making it simple. And we can outwork most other people that I know. Now, I don't mean that as a slight, but I think those are some huge advantages for lawyers. And it's one of the reasons that I think they're just kind of blind to the opportunity of taking on content marketing. What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with all three sentiments. It's my experience as well. And let me put that into a bit of context because I think even beyond the inherent skill sets or the training or the sort of inherent abilities that sort of match one for one with content marketing, one of the things that I think is so surprising is not the right word, but sort of inspiring is, which is one, what I find with most lawyers is that there is a self-awareness that doesn't exist in other businesses. In other words, they're very aware of their need for brand. They're very aware of their need, whether it's the firm or themselves personally, of they need to differentiate in the marketplace and that what they provide in many ways is a commoditized service and they have to bring their special flavor to it. And of course, inherent in that is the point of view on the world, right? Their point of view on the way the world works in whatever practice of law there is. The second thing is not just a training and a expertise in storytelling, which is absolutely true. I mean, as I just find lawyers are much better storytellers sort of in practice. than in other verticals. Marketing is that thing that they do over a glass of wine at night after they get home and they hate it and they don't really like it, but they do it because they know it's necessary. And what I find is that that is a bit of a myth. The myth is that they don't like it. What the truth of the matter is what I find is that there's a great desire to get into creating valuable content, speaking, getting into becoming a thought leader, beginning into becoming an influencer, being known and differentiated in their market space for what it is they're passionate about. The real sort of tactical nuts and bolts of marketing, it's not that they're not interested in it, it's just that there's, again, self-aware that they don't have an expertise there, and that's where they're starting to rely on other people, and unfortunately, this is the gap, this is the challenge that we could sort of segue into, is they wanna do content marketing, they wanna fit that in, but in many ways, they feel guilty that they're not actually doing the marketing that they're supposed to be doing that would enable them to do the content marketing that they should be doing. So, most of the lawyers I see today have well-oiled SEO, and where they don't, it's relatively, straightforward to get them to that to get them to a good place. What they don't have these days is sort of a an ongoing, they've optimized to the point of, moving the needle from 0 to 60, right? And now the frustration is moving the needle from 60 to 61 or 61 to 62, right? Which is it's just hard. It just gets harder and harder to get that incremental result with the search engine optimization. And the way to do that is to really be fresh and accurate with your thought leadership content, whether you call it a blog, whether you call it an online destination, whether you call it a magazine, whether you call it a newsletter, whatever that thing is that represents your sort of fresh take on content. It's a muscle that needs to be, as I've said many, many times to many, many clients, consistency is way more important than quantity, right? So if you can blog once a month, fantastic. If you can blog twice a month, fantastic. If you can blog once a week, great. Getting your content out there and creating that bigger footprint. It's not uncommon for me to go visit with a law firm, and their last blog post is from June of last year, right? It's like, that's not sending the right message, right? Or their latest YouTube video is from February of last year, right? It's like, not, no. If you're gonna do a channel and if you're gonna have content, consistency and freshness is important, not just from an SEO perspective, but from a brand perspective as well. In other words, if I go look you up on YouTube on your firm because I heard your ad or I see something else, and I see that your last video is from 3 years ago, it puts an image in my head. It puts something in my head that says, they're not quite on it." And so that consistency and that freshness is important, and it's a muscle that you just have to exercise, and it's an easy one to exercise, is to come up with that and get it distributed on across all your channels and just keep them updated.
A lot of lawyers are this is hopefully makes sense, are fashion conscious. What I mean by that, if they see their friends doing webinars, if they see their friends doing events, if they see their friends doing random acts of marketing, they're like, well, that looks good on them. And they're pretty smart and they're pretty sharp and they got to go to practice. Maybe I should do the same thing. And a lot of lawyers, I'm amazed at how many firm owners are not really marketing, but imitating firms that are marketing. Like they're doing marketing activities that look like things they should be doing. But when you ask them strategically, like why, what's the purpose? Most of the time they, can't answer the question. Like, why are you doing that? Well, because we need to market. Well, why do you need to market like that? Well, because, it brings us leads. Why those
100%.
leads?
Yeah, 100%. And by the way, that's not endemic to the law firms. That's every business that I've visited in the last 4.5 years. It's like, it's they're all, this is the classic, "Why are you doing this?" "Well, because our competitor does it," right? And so, when we start looking at all of those things, I mean, there was one, so I'll tell a very quick story. Talking with 2, they're B2B companies, and they're both very famous brands. You would recognize both of them. Let's just call them the Coke and Pepsi of this particular B2B marketing set. And I would go in and I would go, okay, why are you writing this content? Like, why are you creating this webinar and this creating? And they're going, oh, because we look at what Pepsi is doing, and we just like look at them and copy them, and we think it's amazing. And so we just basically copy what they're doing and sort of do the same things. Then, as luck would have it, I ended up working with Pepsi about 6 months later, and I go, why are you creating the content and the marketing strategy that you're creating? They're, oh, we looked at Coke and what they do is amazing. So we just sort of copy them. So they're just it's this weird vicious cycle where they're each copying each other because they both assume that the other knows what the hell they're doing. And they just don't. And that is such a common thing in marketing these days.